sky and the storm. The summit of Mount Olympus shimmered in eternal light, its golden halls standing as a testament to the power and unity of the gods. Here, in this sanctified domain above the clouds, Zeus reigned supreme. His presence was a force of nature, an embodiment of the sky's boundless expanse and the storm's fierce fury. As he strode through the great halls of Olympus, his footfalls echoed with authority, each step a reminder of his dominion over gods and mortals alike. Zeus was a king both revered and feared. His towering frame was adorned with the regalia of his station, a flowing robe of midnight blue that mirrored the heavens. His eyes, alight with the electric crackle of thunder, bore into the souls of those who dared to meet his gaze. Yet, beneath this exterior of divine command lay a being of deep contradictions. He was as mercurial as the weather he ruled, capable of immense generosity one moment and destructive wrath the next. Among the gods, his word was law, his strength unparalleled. And yet, for all his might, Zeus was a creature of desires, a king whose heart was often led astray by passions that transcended even his divine station. These desires would forge destinies, ignite wars, and sow discord within the Olympian court, none more so than with his wife Hera. The queen's wrath. Hera, goddess of marriage and queen of Olympus, was as majestic as she was unyielding. Her beauty, though softened by the passage of eons, remained formidable, and her intelligence was razor-sharp. She ruled beside Zeus, not as a subordinate, but as an equal, at least in theory. Yet, their partnership was marred by Zeus's infidelities, each affair a betrayal that chipped away at the foundation of their union. In the halls of Olympus, Hera's sharp eyes missed nothing. She carried herself with a regal composure that masked the simmering rage beneath her calm exterior. Zeus's wandering heart was no secret to her, and each new dalliance only fueled her determination to assert her dominance. Yet, for all her schemes and retaliations, Hera was caught in a cycle of love and loathing, a queen tethered to a king whose desires knew no bounds. Their relationship was a study in contrasts, Zeus's expansive ambition clashing with Hera's fierce possessiveness. Together, they formed the heart of Olympus, their conflicts radiating outwards to touch gods and mortals alike. The mortal world beckons. One such conflict began with a mortal woman whose beauty captured Zeus's attention from the moment he laid eyes upon her. Europa, a princess of Phoenicia, was unlike any mortal he had encountered before. Her golden hair shimmered like sunlight on the ocean, and her laughter carried the music of waves lapping against the shore. Zeus first saw her as she walked along the beach, her bare feet tracing patterns in the sand. The sight stirred something within him, a longing that transcended mere attraction. To Zeus, Europa was not just beautiful, she was a vision of life's ephemeral wonder, a spark of mortal vitality that the gods themselves could never fully grasp. Determined to possess her, Zeus devised a plan. He transformed himself into a magnificent white bull, his form radiant and otherworldly. The bull approached Europa as she played with her companions, its demeanor gentle and inviting. The princess, captivated by the creature's beauty, reached out to touch its silken coat. When Europa climbed onto the bull's back, it was as if the very earth held its breath. In a sudden burst of power, Zeus sprang forward, carrying her across the waves to the island of Crete. The journey was both terrifying and exhilarating, a whirlwind of wind and salt spray that left Europa clinging to the bull's back, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and wonder. A new life in Crete. In Crete, Zeus revealed his true form to Europa, his divine radiance both awe-inspiring and overwhelming. For a moment, Europa was torn between reverence and betrayal. How could she reconcile the gentle creature that had won her trust with the thunderous god who now stood before her? But Zeus was nothing if not persuasive. He spoke of love and destiny, weaving a tapestry of promises that Europa could not resist. In time, she came to accept her new life, becoming the mother of 3 sons, Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Sarpedon. These children, born of divine and mortal union, would go on to shape the course of history, their deeds echoing through the annals of myth. Crete became a sanctuary for Europa, a land of wild beauty where she could begin anew. Yet, the shadow of Zeus's actions loomed large. Hera, ever vigilant, soon learned of her husband's latest betrayal. The queen's revenge. Hera's fury was a tempest unto itself. In her eyes, Zeus's dalliance with Europa was not merely an insult to their union, but a direct challenge to her authority. Determined to make her displeasure known, Hera unleashed her wrath upon Europa and her descendants. She sent a plague to the island of Crete, a relentless blight that withered crops and poisoned the air. The people of Crete, desperate and afraid, turned to Europa for guidance. Though she pleaded with the gods for mercy, her prayers went unanswered. It was only through her strength and resilience that Crete began to recover, her leadership earning her the enduring respect of her people. But Hera's vengeance did not end there. She cursed Europa's lineage, ensuring that her descendants would face trials and tribulations that would test their resolve. In doing so, Hera planted the seeds of future conflict, her actions setting the stage for a saga of heroism and tragedy. The weight of power. For Zeus, the affair with Europa was both a triumph and a reminder of the burdens of his station. He had claimed a moment of mortal beauty, a fleeting escape from the confines of divine duty. Yet, in doing so, he had once again disrupted the delicate balance of Olympus. As he gazed down at Crete from his throne in the heavens, Zeus felt a pang of something akin to regret. Europa's life would never be the same, and the consequences of his actions would ripple across generations. But for Zeus, such thoughts were fleeting. He was a god, and the world was his to shape as he saw fit. In the distance, the clouds began to gather, their dark edges crackling with the promise of a storm. Zeus rose from his throne, his eyes alight with purpose. For all his flaws and contradictions, he remained the king of the gods, a being whose will could not be denied, whose desires would continue to shape the destiny of mortals and immortals alike. The fire of curiosity. The sun dipped low over the horizon, painting the skies above Thebes in hues of amber and crimson. This city, rich in legend and splendor, was where Semele, a princess of unmatched beauty and ambition, resided. The daughter of King Cadmus and Queen Harmonia, she was known throughout the land for her charm and grace. Yet, beneath her poised exterior lay a heart consumed by curiosity, a longing for something beyond mortal comprehension. It was this unquenchable curiosity that first drew Zeus to her. From his seat atop Olympus, he watched Semele as she walked through the palace gardens, her steps light and deliberate. She seemed different from the others he had loved, bold, perceptive, and brimming with a desire for the extraordinary. Zeus, ever drawn to what he could not immediately claim, resolved to win her heart. The beginning of a dangerous love. Zeus descended to Thebes under the cover of darkness, cloaking himself in mortal form. Appearing to Semele as a traveler of noble bearing, he engaged her in conversation, weaving tales of distant lands and the secrets of the divine. Semele, captivated by his charisma and the mysterious aura that surrounded him, found herself drawn to the stranger. Over time, their conversations deepened, moving from the mundane to the metaphysical. Zeus spoke of the gods and their realms with an intimacy that both intrigued and unsettled her. Semele felt a growing certainty that this man was no ordinary mortal. When he finally revealed his divine identity, it was not fear but fascination that filled her heart. For Zeus, the connection was intoxicating. Semele's willingness to embrace the unknown, to confront the power and majesty of his divine essence, set her apart from his other lovers. But this love was not without peril, for it awakened Hera's wrath once more. Hera's deception. From Olympus, Hera observed her husband's infidelity with mounting rage. Unlike Europa, whose abduction had taken her far from the Olympian queen's immediate reach, Semele was a mere mortal, a target upon whom Hera could easily unleash her vengeance. Disguising herself as an elderly nursemaid, Hera approached Semele under the pretense of offering counsel. With practiced charm, she won the young princess's trust, posing as a loyal servant eager to protect her mistress's interests. Hera listened intently as Semele confided in her about her divine lover, recounting the moments of passion and wonder that defined their union. Feigning shock and concern, Hera planted the seed of doubt in Semele's mind. If he is truly Zeus, king of the gods, then why does he hide his full glory from you? She whispered, her voice heavy with calculated skepticism. Surely, a god of such power would have no need for secrecy. The words lingered in Semele's thoughts long after the nursemaid had departed. Her curiosity, already a defining trait, now became a consuming force. She resolved to confront Zeus and demand proof of his divine nature, a decision that would seal her fate. The reckoning. When next Zeus visited Semele, she met him with an uncharacteristic intensity. If you truly love me, she said, her voice trembling with resolve, then reveal yourself to me as you are. Show me your true form, as king of the gods. Zeus's expression darkened. He had anticipated many questions, many requests, but not this. Semele, he began gently, you do not understand what you ask. To behold me in my true form is to gaze upon the essence of the heavens themselves. It is a power no mortal can endure. But Semele was unwavering. "If our love is real, you will not deny me this." Bound by the oaths of the gods, Zeus could not refuse her request. With a heavy heart, he warned her one final time before summoning the full force of his divinity. The room filled with blinding light as Zeus transformed, his mortal guise dissolving to reveal a being of pure energy and power. Thunder cracked, and lightning arced across the chamber, illuminating Semele's awe-stricken face. For a moment, she saw the universe itself reflected in his form, a vision of incomprehensible beauty and terror. Then came the fire. Semele's mortal body, unable to withstand the intensity of Zeus's true essence, was consumed in an instant. The palace walls shook with the force of the event, and Zeus, stricken with grief, cradled the remains of his lover. The birth of a god. Amid the devastation, Zeus realized that Semele had been carrying his child. Acting quickly, he rescued the unborn infant from the flames and sewed him into his own thigh, a desperate act to preserve the life of his son. Thus Dionysus, the god of wine and revelry, was born, his life a testament to both the tragedy of his mother's death and the resilience of divine bloodlines. Dionysus's birth marked a turning point for Zeus. The grief of losing Semele tempered his usual bravado, casting a shadow over his future pursuits. Though his love for her had been brief, it had burned with an intensity that would leave a lasting mark on his soul. Hera's triumph and frustration. Hera, watching from the shadows, felt a bitter satisfaction at the outcome of her scheme. Yet her victory was incomplete. The birth of Dionysus, a new god who would rise to prominence among the Olympians, was a reminder that Zeus's actions could not be undone, no matter how devastating the consequences. For Hera, the affair with Semele became another chapter in her endless battle to maintain control over her marriage and her station. Though she had succeeded in destroying the mortal who dared to love her husband, she could not erase the legacy of their union. The eternal cycle. In the aftermath of Semele's death, Thebes became a city steeped in both sorrow and reverence. Temples were erected in her honor, and the tale of her love for Zeus was passed down through generations. For the people of Thebes, Semele's story was a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers of reaching too far beyond one's mortal bounds. For Zeus, the loss of Semele was a lesson in the fragility of human life and the destructive power of his own desires. Yet, despite the pain, he could not abandon his pursuit of beauty and connection, no matter how fleeting or destructive it might be. The sky above Thebes remained clear, a stark contrast to the storm that had raged within its walls. Zeus, gazing down from Olympus, felt the weight of his actions settle upon him like a mantle. But as the winds carried whispers of new tales and new temptations, he knew that his story was far from over. The trials of Io. The quiet plains of Argos stretched endlessly under the vast sky, their tranquility a deceptive mask for the turmoil brewing within the palace walls. Io, a high priestess of Hera, was a figure of devotion and grace, her every action a tribute to the queen of the gods. Her beauty was understated yet radiant, her features imbued with a serenity that seemed otherworldly. It was this serenity that first caught Zeus's attention. As he gazed upon Io from his perch on Olympus, he felt an undeniable pull. Unlike other mortals he had pursued, Io was not defined by bold ambition or fiery passion. She embodied something gentler, a quiet strength that stirred a longing within him. Yet Zeus knew the risk of pursuing Io. As Hera's priestess, she was under the direct protection of the goddess, her very life entwined with Hera's power. But Zeus, as always, was undeterred by danger. His desire for Io eclipsed all else, and he resolved to make her his own. A forbidden connection. Zeus descended to Argos in the guise of a mortal, cloaking himself in anonymity as he approached Io in the sacred grove where she performed her daily rites. At first, their encounters were fleeting, a shared glance, a whispered exchange. But over time, Zeus's persistence wore down Io's reservations. She found herself drawn to the enigmatic stranger, his words laced with a wisdom and charm that seemed beyond mortal comprehension. When Zeus finally revealed his true identity, Io was struck with a mix of awe and dread. To be loved by the king of the gods was an honor few could imagine, yet it was also a dangerous burden. She hesitated, torn between her duty to Hera and the allure of the divine. But Zeus was relentless. His declarations of love and promises of protection broke through her resistance, and Io surrendered to the inevitable. Their union, however, did not go unnoticed. Hera's wrath unleashed. Hera, ever watchful, soon learned of Zeus's betrayal. Her fury was swift and unyielding, her jealousy sharpened by the knowledge that her own priestess had been the object of her husband's affections. She descended upon Argos like a storm, her presence suffocating and absolute. Zeus, anticipating Hera's vengeance, acted quickly to protect Io. In a desperate bid to shield her from his wife's wrath, he transformed Io into a white cow, her human form replaced by a fragile, trembling creature. But Hera was not so easily deceived. Recognizing Zeus's handiwork, she demanded the cow as a gift, her tone laced with false sweetness. Bound by the laws of hospitality, Zeus had no choice but to comply, handing Io over to Hera and praying that his wife's wrath would subside. The endless journey. Hera, far from satisfied, assigned the giant Argus Panoptes to watch over Io. Argus, with his 100 eyes, was an ever-vigilant sentinel, his gaze ensuring that Io could not escape. Trapped in her new form, Io wandered the land, her once peaceful life now a nightmare of isolation and despair. Zeus, racked with guilt, sought a way to free her. He enlisted the help of Hermes, the cunning messenger god, who approached Argus with a plan. Using his lyre and silver tongue, Hermes lulled the giant into a deep sleep, his 100 eyes closing one by one. Then, with a swift stroke of his blade, Hermes ended Argus's watch, freeing Io from her captor. Hera, enraged by Argus's death, unleashed a gadfly to torment Io. The insect pursued her relentlessly, its sting driving her to flee across the world. From the shores of Greece to the deserts of Egypt, Io's journey became a symbol of endurance and suffering, transformation and redemption. In Egypt, Io's torment finally came to an end. Zeus, moved by her unwavering resilience, restored her human form, his power breaking the curse that had bound her. Though her ordeal had left her scarred, Io emerged stronger, her spirit tempered by the trials she had endured. Io's story did not end in despair. In Egypt, she was revered as a goddess, her divine connection to Zeus elevating her status among mortals. She bore a son, Epiphus, whose lineage would shape the destiny of nations. Through her descendants, Io's legacy would endure, her name forever entwined with the myths and histories of the ancient world. Hera's lingering resentment. Though Io's suffering had ended, Hera's fury was far from extinguished. For the queen of the gods, every affair of Zeus's was a challenge to her authority, a reminder of her inability to control her husband's wandering heart. Yet, despite her anger, Hera could not undo what had been done. Io's transformation, her trials, and her ultimate redemption were now part of the fabric of the world, a story that would be told and retold for generations. The lessons of Io. As Zeus watched over Io from the heavens, he felt a rare pang of regret. Her journey had been one of pain and perseverance, a testament to the resilience of the mortal spirit. In her suffering, Zeus saw the consequences of his actions laid bare, the cost of his desires writ large. And yet, he could not turn away from the allure of mortal beauty and vitality. For Zeus, Io was both a cautionary tale and a source of admiration, a reminder of the fragility and strength of those who walked the earth below. The winds carried whispers of Io's story across the plains of Argos, her name a beacon of hope and endurance. In her survival, there was triumph; in her suffering, a reflection of the gods' capricious nature. And as the stars began to light the evening sky, Zeus turned his gaze toward the horizon, already drawn to the promise of new tales and new desires. Vengeance. These children, born of both mortal and divine lineage, were harbingers of a world on the brink of chaos. Their fates were intertwined with the ambitions and desires of gods and men, their very existence a reminder of the consequences of Zeus's actions. Hera's quiet fury. When Hera learned of Zeus's affair with Leda, her anger simmered beneath the surface. This time, she did not unleash her wrath in the form of curses or monstrous tormentors. Instead, she turned her attention to the future, watching as the seeds of conflict sown by Zeus began to sprout. Helen's beauty, a gift from her divine parentage, would become both a blessing and a curse. As suitors from across Greece vied for her hand, tensions grew among the kingdoms, each ruler willing to fight to claim her. Hera, seeing an opportunity to manipulate events to her advantage, subtly fanned the flames of rivalry, setting the stage for the Trojan War. For Hera, this quiet interference was a form of revenge, an acknowledgement that while she could not prevent Zeus's infidelities, she could ensure that the chaos they wrought served her purposes. The birth of heroes. As Leda's children grew, their unique destinies began to take shape. Castor and Pollux, though inseparable in life, were marked by their shared yet divided mortality. Castor, the mortal twin, faced the inevitability of death, while Pollux, immortal by Zeus's blood, bore the pain of eternal separation from his brother. Their love for one another transcended even the boundaries of life and death, as Pollux ultimately chose to share his immortality with Castor, allowing them to live alternately in Olympus and the underworld. Helen's beauty became her defining trait, a source of admiration and envy that followed her from childhood into adulthood. Though cherished by her family, she was also a constant reminder of the divine forces that had shaped their lives, a symbol of both the gods' favor and their interference. Clytemnestra, meanwhile, grew into a woman of fierce intelligence and unyielding will. Her marriage to Agamemnon would be a union fraught with betrayal and bloodshed, her life a reflection of the darker consequences of divine intervention. The looming shadow of Troy. As the years passed, the repercussions of Zeus's union with Leda became increasingly apparent. Helen's abduction by Paris, Prince of Troy, would become the spark that ignited the Trojan War, a conflict that would draw heroes, gods, and mortals into its deadly embrace. For Zeus, the war was both a tragedy and an opportunity. Though he had caused the events that led to its outbreak, he viewed the war as a means of shaping the mortal world, of testing the mettle of heroes and forging legends that would endure for centuries. Yet, even as he manipulated the fates of men and women, Zeus could not escape the weight of his own choices. The children born of his union with Leda were reminders of the fine line between creation and destruction, of the delicate balance that defined his existence. A queen's legacy. For Leda, the consequences of her encounter with Zeus were both profound and bittersweet. She had given birth to children whose lives would become the stuff of legend, yet their fates were beyond her control. Her role in their stories was that of a quiet observer, a mother who could only watch as the threads of destiny wove themselves into patterns of triumph and tragedy. As the sun set over Sparta, casting long shadows across the land, Leda stood on the palace balcony, her thoughts heavy with the knowledge of what was to come. She had been touched by the divine, her life forever changed by a single moment of passion. And though her story would fade into the background of history, the legacy of her children would endure, their names etched into the fabric of myth. The torment of Semele. Thebes, a city of grandeur and myth, stood as a testament to mortal ambition and divine influence. Its golden spires glimmered in the sunlight, its streets bustling with life and purpose. Among its many citizens, none was more radiant than Semele, the daughter of King Cadmus and Queen Harmonia. Known for her beauty and spirited nature, she carried an insatiable curiosity that set her apart from the other women of her lineage. From the heights of Olympus, Zeus watched Semele with fascination. Unlike the others who had captured his attention, there was something about her, an unspoken fire, a defiant energy, that drew him closer. Her laughter, her grace, and the way she moved through the world with confidence stirred something deep within him. Zeus knew the risks of pursuing her, for Hera, his wife, had grown more vigilant with each passing betrayal. But the allure of Semele proved irresistible, and Zeus resolved to claim her heart. A love beyond the mortal realm. Zeus descended to Thebes under the guise of a mortal nobleman, his charisma and commanding presence immediately captivating Semele. Though she did not recognize him as a god, there was something about him that felt otherworldly, an intensity in his gaze, a weight in his words that transcended mortal comprehension. Their courtship was brief but intense, their love igniting like a flame in the dark. Zeus, unburdened by the pretense of mortal life, revealed his divine nature to Semele, promising her a place in his world beyond the reach of time and death. Semele, swept away by the promise of eternal love, surrendered to his embrace, unaware of the danger that loomed over their union. Hera's deception. In Olympus, Hera seethed. The queen of the gods had long grown accustomed to Zeus's infidelities, but each new affair stung her pride and deepened her resolve to exact vengeance. Semele, a mortal who dared to claim the love of the king of the gods, became the focus of her ire. Disguising herself as Beroe, Semele's trusted nursemaid, Hera descended to Thebes. Her cunning plan unfolded with calculated precision. Gaining Semele's trust, Hera listened as the princess confided in her about her divine lover, recounting the promises Zeus had made and the dreams they shared. Feigning concern, Hera planted a seed of doubt in Semele's mind. If he is truly Zeus, king of the gods, why does he not reveal himself to you in his full glory? She asked, her voice dripping with feigned innocence. Surely, if his love is as great as he claims, he would prove it to you. Semele, already enamored and curious, could not resist the thought. Her trust in Zeus was unshaken, and her desire to see him in his true form grew stronger with each passing day. The fatal request. When Zeus next visited Semele, she greeted him with an unexpected request. "If you truly love me," she said, her voice filled with resolve, "show me your true self. Let me see you as you are, as king of the gods." Zeus hesitated, his heart sinking. He understood the danger of her request, the mortal inability to withstand the full power of a god. "Semele," he pleaded, "you do not understand what you ask. To see me as I am would be to face the essence of the heavens. It is not a sight meant for mortal eyes." But Semele, emboldened by Hera's manipulation, insisted. Bound by an unbreakable oath, Zeus could not refuse her. With a heavy heart, he prepared to fulfill her request, knowing it would bring her doom. The unveiling and tragedy. The night was dark, the air heavy with anticipation, as Zeus revealed his true form to Semele. The chamber filled with blinding light, the roar of thunder, and the crackle of lightning. For a brief moment, Semele beheld the majesty of the king of the gods, a vision of infinite power and beauty that defied comprehension. But mortal flesh was not made to endure such a sight. The divine radiance consumed Semele in an instant, her mortal form reduced to ash. Zeus, devastated, was left clutching the remnants of the woman he loved. Amid the devastation, Zeus discovered that Semele had been carrying his child. Determined to save the unborn life, he acted quickly, rescuing the infant from her ashes and sewing him into his own thigh. The birth of Dionysus. From this extraordinary act of love and desperation, Dionysus, the god of wine, revelry, and madness, was born. Raised in secret to protect him from Hera's wrath, Dionysus would grow to become one of the most enigmatic and celebrated gods of the Olympian pantheon. His life, a blend of joy and chaos, was a testament to both the tragedy and resilience of his origins. Hera's hollow victory. Hera watched from the shadows, her heart a tumult of triumph and frustration. She had succeeded in destroying Semele, but the birth of Dionysus was a reminder of her inability to fully control the consequences of Zeus's actions. For every mortal she struck down, another divine legacy rose to take its place, each one a new challenge to her authority. In Thebes, the story of Semele became legend. Her name was spoken with reverence, her tragedy a cautionary tale of love and ambition. Temples were built in her honor, and her son's rise to power ensured that her memory would never fade. A god reflects. For Zeus, Semele's death marked a turning point. It was a stark reminder of the fragility of mortals and the destructive potential of his own power. Though he continued to pursue his desires, the memory of Semele lingered, a ghost of what could have been, a reminder of the fine line between love and destruction. As the stars illuminated the heavens, Zeus turned his gaze to the world below. The birth of Dionysus was a bittersweet victory, a symbol of both the beauty and the tragedy that defined his existence. But even as he mourned the loss of Semele, he could not ignore the endless possibilities that lay ahead. The new stories waiting to be written, the lives waiting to be touched by his divine hand. Alcmene and the birth of a hero. In the heart of Tiryns, a city fortified by stone walls said to have been built by giants, lived Alcmene, a mortal woman of unparalleled grace and virtue. Born to Electrian, the king of Mycenae, she carried the bloodline of heroes and kings. Her beauty was undeniable, but it was her intelligence, courage, and unwavering devotion to her husband, Amphitryon, that truly set her apart. Alcmene was no ordinary mortal. Her sharp mind and sense of duty earned her admiration far and wide. Yet, it was her loyalty that drew the attention of Zeus. For the king of the gods, her devotion was both a challenge and an invitation, a reminder of the purity and strength that mortal women could possess. A deception in the night. Zeus's desire for Alcmene grew as he observed her from Olympus. But unlike his previous pursuits, this conquest required careful planning. Alcmene was deeply in love with her husband, and Zeus knew that to approach her openly would invite rejection. Disguising himself as Amphitryon, Zeus descended to Tiryns under the cover of darkness. He appeared at Alcmene's door with the familiar confidence and tenderness of her husband, who was away at war. Zeus's transformation was flawless, and Alcmene, believing her husband had returned early, welcomed him with open arms. That night, Zeus extended the hours, stretching time itself, so that his union with Alcmene lasted an eternity within a single moment. When the dawn finally broke, he departed, leaving Alcmene with no suspicion of the truth. Unbeknownst to her, the encounter would change the course of her life and the destiny of Greece itself. Amphitryon's return. The real Amphitryon returned shortly after, bearing the spoils of his victorious campaign. At first, Alcmene greeted him with joy, but her recounting of his supposed early visit left Amphitryon confused and suspicious. How could he have been in two places at once? Seeking clarity, Amphitryon consulted the prophet Tiresias, who revealed the truth. Alcmene had been visited by Zeus, who had taken the form of her husband. Though furious and humiliated, Amphitryon could not bring himself to punish Alcmene, who had acted without knowledge or intent to betray him. Instead, he accepted her explanation, though the revelation left an indelible mark on their relationship. The birth of Hercules. In time, Alcmene gave birth to twins, one mortal, Iphicles, fathered by Amphitryon, and one divine, Heracles, later known as Hercules, fathered by Zeus. From the moment of their birth, the difference between the two brothers was apparent. Hercules possessed strength beyond mortal comprehension, a gift from his divine parentage, and a destiny that would set him apart as one of the greatest heroes in Greek mythology. Hera, however, was not content to let Hercules' life unfold without interference. Consumed by jealousy, she sought to destroy the child who symbolized yet another of Zeus's betrayals. Hera's first attack. On the night of Hercules' birth, Hera sent two serpents to his cradle, their fangs dripping with venom. The creatures slithered toward the infant, their movements silent and deadly. But as they approached, Hercules awoke and grasped the snakes in his tiny hands. With a strength that belied his age, he crushed them, their lifeless bodies falling to the floor. The act astonished all who witnessed it, cementing Hercules' reputation as a child of extraordinary power. Though Hera's plan had failed, her hatred for Hercules only deepened, and she vowed to make his life as arduous as possible. A mother's struggles. Alcmene's life was irrevocably altered by the birth of Hercules. Though she loved her son deeply, his divine nature brought with it a host of challenges. The attention of the gods, both benevolent and malevolent, hovered over their household like a storm cloud. Amphitryon, though he accepted Hercules as his own, often struggled with the implications of raising a child destined for greatness. His mortal son, Iphicles, lived in the shadow of his brother's feats, a dynamic that weighed heavily on the family. For Alcmene, the burden of raising a demigod was matched only by her unwavering determination to protect her children. She faced every trial with the same courage and wisdom that had defined her life before Zeus's intrusion. Hercules' destiny unfolds. As Hercules grew, his strength and bravery became the stuff of legend. Under the tutelage of wise mentors and seasoned warriors, he honed his skills, preparing for the challenges that lay ahead. Yet, his path was never free of Hera's machinations. The goddess orchestrated a series of events that would test Hercules' resolve, including the infamous 12 labors, a series of seemingly impossible tasks designed to break his spirit. Despite her efforts, Hercules' resilience and heroism only grew, cementing his place as one of the greatest figures in Greek mythology. The legacy of Alcmene. For Alcmene, the story of Hercules was both a source of pride and sorrow. She lived to see her son achieve feats that defied mortal comprehension, yet she also bore witness to the trials and tragedies that defined his life. Her legacy, however, extended beyond Hercules. Through her strength and wisdom, Alcmene became a symbol of resilience, a mortal who had navigated the complexities of divine interference with grace and determination. In her later years, Alcmene retired to a quieter life, her story fading into the background as Hercules' legend grew. Yet, her role in shaping the hero's destiny was undeniable, a testament to the enduring impact of mortal strength in a world dominated by gods. A father's reflection. Zeus, observing from Olympus, felt a mixture of pride and regret as he watched Hercules' life unfold. The son he had fathered with Alcmene had exceeded even his greatest expectations, yet the pain and struggles Hercules endured were a stark reminder of the consequences of his divine meddling. For all his power, Zeus could not shield his children from the trials of life. Each hero, each mortal born of his unions, was both a triumph and a tragedy, a reflection of the paradox that defined his existence as king of the gods. Demeter and the bonds of motherhood. The fields of Eleusis stretched endlessly beneath a sky of gentle azure, the earth rich with the fruits of Demeter's labor. She walked among the wheat and barley, her presence a silent blessing that nurtured the crops and brought abundance to the land. As the goddess of agriculture, Demeter was revered not only for her power over the harvest, but also for the warmth and love she bestowed upon the mortal world. Her heart, however, was not solely devoted to the growth of crops. It was to her daughter, Persephone, that Demeter's deepest affection was bound. The child of her union with Zeus, Persephone embodied the very essence of youth and beauty. Their bond was one of profound love, and Demeter's world revolved around her daughter's happiness. The joy of motherhood. Demeter had always taken great care in raising Persephone, nurturing her with an intensity that only a mother could understand. Together, they wandered the fields, picking flowers and basking in the serenity of their bond. Persephone's laughter filled the air like the sound of a spring breeze, and Demeter's heart swelled with pride at the sight of her daughter's joy. But this happiness was not to last. Hades' desire. Far below, in the shadowed realm of the underworld, Hades, the god of death, watched Persephone with longing. His domain was one of darkness and solitude, a place devoid of warmth or life. But when his eyes fell upon Persephone, he saw something that stirred a deep desire within him, a spark of life that he could not ignore. Hades, unlike his brothers, did not seek affection or companionship with mortals. But there was something about Persephone's beauty, her purity, and the radiance she brought to the world above that he could not resist. He resolved to make her his queen, to bring her to the underworld where she would reign by his side. The abduction of Persephone. On a day like any other, Persephone ventured into a meadow, picking flowers with a carefree heart. The earth trembled beneath her feet, and as she reached for the most beautiful blossom she had ever seen, the ground split open. From the chasm rose Hades' chariot, drawn by black horses, and before Persephone could cry out, she was pulled into the depths of the earth, disappearing from the world above. Demeter, who had been nearby, rushed to the spot where her daughter had vanished, calling her name in desperation. The earth lay silent, offering no answer, and as the days passed without a trace of Persephone, Demeter's heart grew heavy with grief. Her joy had been ripped away, and the land, deprived of her nurturing presence, began to wither. A mother's grief. Grief consumed Demeter. She withdrew from the world, abandoning her duties as goddess of agriculture. Without her care, the crops failed, and famine spread across the land. The once abundant earth now lay barren, its fields dry and cracked. Zeus, watching the suffering of mortals and gods alike, saw that Demeter's grief was threatening to undo the balance of the world. He called upon Hermes to seek out Hades and negotiate the return of Persephone. But Hades, though he had fallen in love with Persephone, was unwilling to let her go. Instead, he offered a compromise. Persephone would be allowed to return to her mother for part of the year, but for the remainder of the year, she would remain with him in the underworld, bound by the laws of fate. Persephone, torn between her love for her mother and the darkness of her new realm, accepted the deal, and the earth rejoiced as Demeter's grief began to lift. The cycle of seasons. Persephone's return to the world above marked the beginning of a new cycle. Each spring and summer, Demeter's joy and the earth's bounty returned, and as Persephone descended into the underworld once more, the world fell into winter's grasp. The seasons themselves became a reflection of Demeter's eternal bond with her daughter, a cycle of reunion and separation that mirrored the cycles of life and death. Hades' love for Persephone remained steadfast, even as she spent half of each year with her mother. Their relationship was one of contrast, light and dark, life and death, and in it, the world found balance. Persephone, though bound to the underworld, had not been claimed by it entirely. She was both queen and prisoner, a figure who bridged two worlds, forever changed by her time in the realm of the dead. The eternal bond. For Demeter, the return of Persephone was a moment of bittersweet joy. Each time her daughter left, Demeter's heart would ache with longing, but each reunion brought new light and hope to the world. The love between mother and daughter, though tested by the forces of life and death, remained unbreakable. In the temples of Eleusis, the people worshipped Demeter and Persephone, honoring the goddess of agriculture and the queen of the underworld. The Eleusinian Mysteries, a sacred ritual of life, death, and rebirth, became a symbol of the eternal cycle that Demeter and Persephone embodied. The legacy of Demeter. Demeter's influence extended beyond the harvest. Her love for Persephone, and her willingness to sacrifice everything for her daughter's well-being, became a model of maternal devotion. The goddess who nurtured the earth was also the one who bore the weight of grief and loss, her love unwavering despite the pain that came with it. As the years passed, Demeter's relationship with Persephone was celebrated not only in myth, but also in the cycles of life itself. In the blooming flowers of spring and the withering of autumn, the world felt the pulse of their bond, a connection that transcended both life and death, a testament to the power of love that could endure even the darkest of fates. And as Demeter watched the fields of Eleusis flourish once more, she knew that her love for Persephone, though separated by time and space, would never fade. The earth itself bore witness to that unbreakable bond, a legacy of love that would last for all eternity. Mnemosyne and the creation of the Muses. The air of Olympus was thick with the weight of knowledge and wisdom, a realm where time stretched far beyond the mortal understanding. At the heart of this divine mountain stood Mnemosyne, the goddess of memory, whose presence was both ethereal and profound. With flowing dark hair and eyes as deep as the river Lethe, Mnemosyne possessed the power to recall the past, to preserve the stories of gods and mortals alike. She was the keeper of all that had been and all that would be, a living archive of history, woven into the fabric of existence itself. Her mind, vast and infinite, held the key to the collective memory of the world, and through her, stories and songs passed down through generations. But though Mnemosyne's power was vast, it was tempered by a quiet sorrow, a yearning for something more than just the preservation of time. She desired not only to remember, but to create, to inspire, to share the beauty of memory with the world. It was this desire that led her to Zeus. The meeting of minds. Zeus, ever drawn to the enigmatic, found in Mnemosyne a kindred spirit. Her wisdom, her depth, and her quiet grace captivated him in a way that few others could. She was not just another conquest or fleeting passion. She was a force of nature, a goddess who understood the weight of the past and the potential of the future. As they spent time together, their conversations delved into the mysteries of time, the nature of memory, and the stories of old. The two gods shared a bond that went beyond passion, a union of minds and hearts. Zeus, ever the lover of beauty and chaos, was drawn to Mnemosyne's order and understanding. She was the keeper of the past, and together they would give birth to something entirely new, something that would define the very essence of creation itself. The union and the birth of the Muses. Their union, unlike many of Zeus's affairs, was marked by a deep intellectual and emotional connection. After 9 nights of passionate intimacy, Mnemosyne conceived, and from her womb would come the Muses. 9 daughters, each a divine embodiment of an art form, a representation of the creative spirit that would shape the world. The Muses, born under the gaze of Zeus and Mnemosyne, were a gift to the world, to mortals and gods alike. Each muse represented a different facet of creativity. Calliope, the muse of epic poetry; Clio, the muse of history; Euterpe, the muse of music; Erato, the muse of love poetry; Melpomene, the muse of tragedy; Talia, the muse of comedy; Terpsichore, the muse of dance; Polyhymnia, the muse of sacred hymns; and Urania, the muse of astronomy. With the birth of these divine beings, the creative potential of the world was unlocked. They became the inspiration for all who sought to create, to express, to understand the mysteries of the universe. Through their influence, poets, musicians, artists, and thinkers would find their voices, and the world would come alive with the beauty of imagination. A gift to humanity. The Muses, though born from the union of 2 gods, were not creatures confined to the divine realm. They would walk among mortals, inspiring the greatest works of art, the most profound philosophies, and the most resonant songs. Wherever there was a spark of creativity, the Muses were there, their presence infusing the air with a divine energy that could not be denied. But for Mnemosyne, the greatest joy came from the knowledge that the stories she had once preserved in her mind would now take on a life of their own, carried by the voices of mortals. Her role was no longer just to remember, it was to give life to memory, to allow creation to flourish in a way that would endure across the ages. Zeus's reflection. For Zeus, the birth of the Muses was both a moment of immense pride and deep reflection. In them, he saw not only the power of creation, but the lasting influence of his actions. Each muse, a reflection of his union with Mnemosyne, carried the essence of both gods, their beauty and wisdom intertwined in ways that would shape the world for centuries. As the king of the gods, Zeus understood that his power was not just in his ability to shape the heavens and the earth, but in his ability to inspire, whether through divine intervention or the quiet influence of those he loved. The Muses, the daughters of memory and creation, would serve as a constant reminder of the creative power that flowed through his blood and the world he ruled. The Muses among mortals. As the Muses traveled among mortals, they became central figures in the creative process. Poets and artists sought their guidance, often invoking their names before embarking on their greatest works. They were not simply sources of inspiration, but also protectors of the creative spirit, guarding the sacred flame of artistic endeavor. In the courts of kings, the halls of philosophers, and the stages of theaters, the Muses were revered as divine patrons. Their influence was felt in every note of music, every line of verse, and every stroke of a painter's brush. They were not gods to be worshipped with sacrifice and prayer, but rather with acts of creation, through the power of human expression that transcended time and space. Mnemosyne's legacy. For Mnemosyne, the legacy of her union with Zeus was one of profound fulfillment. Her desire to not only remember, but to create was realized through the Muses, and she watched with quiet joy as their influence spread across the world. Her role as the goddess of memory was still vital. Memory was the foundation upon which creation was built, but she had come to understand that memory itself was not stagnant. It was alive, evolving, and ever-changing. Through the Muses, Mnemosyne had become part of the very act of creation, a goddess whose influence transcended even time itself. The stories of the gods, the lives of mortals, and the works of artists would be preserved in the minds and hearts of those who came after. And in this eternal cycle of creation and memory, Mnemosyne's legacy would live on forever. Zeus and the nature of legacy. As he looked upon the world, Zeus reflected on the power of creation and inspiration. His children, whether divine or mortal, had left their mark on the world in ways that transcended even the scope of his own godly influence. The Muses, born from his union with Mnemosyne, were the most powerful example of this. They were his legacy, a gift to the world that would endure through the ages, shaping art, culture, and human expression in ways that no mortal could ever imagine. In the divine realm, Zeus knew that his reign would eventually come to an end. But through the Muses, through Mnemosyne's gift to the world, his influence would continue long after he was gone. His legacy would live on in the songs sung, the stories told, and the art created, an eternal testament to the creative force that lay within him, within Mnemosyne, and within the world itself. The tragedy of Niobe. The city of Thebes, grand and ancient, stood as a testament to mortal ambition, its walls adorned with the echoes of gods and kings. Among the city's most illustrious rulers was Niobe, the queen of Thebes, known for her beauty and pride. Niobe was not only adored for her physical grace, but her spirit and determination also set her apart from other women of her time. Her reign was marked by strength, wisdom, and an unshakable sense of superiority. Niobe's pride was her children. She had borne 14, 7 sons and 7 daughters, and she loved them dearly. Her pride was evident in every word she spoke, every gesture she made. Niobe would often boast of her numerous progeny, claiming that she was more blessed than Leto, the mother of Apollo and Artemis, who had only 2 children. To her, this was a sign of her superiority, and she openly mocked Leto for the modesty of her own family. This pride, however, would lead to a catastrophe, a divine vengeance that would change Niobe's life forever. The wrath of Leto. Leto, the mother of Apollo and Artemis, had long been silent in the face of Niobe's insults. But the goddess's patience was not without limit. Leto's children, Apollo and Artemis, embodied perfection. Apollo, the god of the sun and prophecy, and Artemis, the goddess of the moon and hunt, were both powerful, revered, and untouchable. The insults of Niobe, which mocked Leto's divine motherhood, could not go unanswered. Furious, Leto sent her children to punish Niobe for her arrogance. Apollo, with his bow drawn and his arrows sharp, and Artemis, with her silver arrows, descended upon Thebes. They arrived under the cover of darkness, silent and deadly, their presence a harbinger of doom. The first arrow flew, striking down Niobe's eldest son. The second arrow, swift and sure, struck another. The children of Niobe, one by one, fell before the onslaught of the divine. In a matter of hours, all 14 of Niobe's children lay dead, their bodies scattered across the palace grounds. The price of hubris. Niobe's grief was inconceivable. She had lost everything, her children, her legacy, her pride, and she was left to face the consequences of her own arrogance. Her pride had led her to mock a goddess whose children were far more powerful than her own, and now, she was forced to endure the consequences of her words. Devastated by the loss, Niobe's once proud spirit was broken. Her sorrow was so great that she fled the palace, wandering the hills of Thebes in a silent, anguished stupor. She sought no solace, no comfort from the gods or mortals. Her heart was hollow, consumed by grief. In her mourning, she was transformed. The gods, seeing her endless suffering, turned her into stone, her form frozen in the image of a grieving mother. She became an eternal symbol of the consequences of hubris, a figure whose grief would never be allowed to fade. As she stood in stone, her tears flowed forever, falling from her stony eyes like rain, an unceasing testament to the sorrow she had brought upon herself. The fall of Niobe. Niobe's tale became a cautionary one, passed down through generations as a story of pride and its destructive consequences. The gods, who had once been revered and feared, had struck her down not because of her pride alone, but because her pride had led her to mock the divine, a sin in the eyes of the gods that could not be overlooked. Though Niobe's children were lost to her forever, her memory lived on in the stone form that stood in Thebes. She had once been a queen, proud of her children and her place in the world. But in the end, it was her arrogance that led to her undoing, and she was condemned to remain in stone for eternity, her grief never-ending. The echoes of the gods. In the halls of Olympus, the gods watched as Niobe's story unfolded. Hera, the queen of the gods, took no pleasure in Niobe's suffering, but she did recognize the significance of the punishment. It was a reminder that even the proudest of mortals could not escape the wrath of the gods when they crossed a line. For Apollo and Artemis, the act of retribution was not a source of joy, but a necessary one. They had been commanded to punish Niobe for her arrogance, and they had fulfilled that duty without hesitation. However, the tragedy that followed, the mourning of a mother for her children, was something that even the gods could not undo. In the end, the gods were left with the knowledge that their power could both create and destroy, that their will could shape the lives of mortals in ways they could not foresee. The story of Niobe was a stark reminder that those who dared to challenge the gods with pride and arrogance could expect nothing but destruction in return. The enduring legacy of Niobe. Though her children were lost and her pride was shattered, Niobe's legacy endured. She became a symbol not just of grief, but of the danger of unchecked hubris. Her story was one that would be told for generations, a tale of a queen who once stood proud, only to fall under the weight of her own pride. Her name, spoken in both sorrow and warning, became an indelible part of Greek myth. The gods had cast down Niobe, but in doing so, they had ensured that her memory would never fade. In the stone statue of the grieving mother, Niobe's tale lived on, a reminder to all who heard it of the cost of arrogance and the price of mocking the gods. Her grief was not merely the sorrow of a mother who had lost her children. It was the eternal reminder of the fragility of pride, the fleeting nature of mortal power, and the wrath of the gods. And so Niobe, though she was turned to stone, would forever stand as a symbol of divine retribution, her tears falling forever, her pride and her sorrow immortalized in the hearts of those who would hear her tale. The Trojan War and the legacy of Zeus' offspring. The war began long before the first arrow flew. It started with a decision, a simple, seemingly innocent act that spiraled into one of the most devastating conflicts in the history of the gods and mortals alike. The seeds of the Trojan War were sown at the wedding of Peleus and Thetis, a union that brought together gods and mortals in a celebration meant to mark the strength of love and harmony. But as with so many divine gatherings, the presence of the gods brought not peace, but the potential for conflict. At this grand celebration, a golden apple appeared, a gift that would seal the fate of an entire city. It was inscribed with the words "to the fairest" and was intended as an offering to Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite, the three goddesses who had arrived uninvited to the wedding. The gods, each claiming the apple as their own, called upon Paris, the prince of Troy, to settle the dispute. Paris, young and handsome, found himself torn between the three goddesses, each offering him gifts in exchange for the coveted prize. Hera promised him dominion over Europe and Asia. Athena offered wisdom and victory in battle, and Aphrodite, the goddess of love, promised him the most beautiful woman in the world, Helen of Sparta. Paris, whose heart was swayed by love and beauty, chose Aphrodite. This seemingly simple choice would set into motion a chain of events that would lead to the fall of Troy and the destruction of countless lives. The abduction of Helen. Helen, the wife of King Menelaus of Sparta, was indeed the most beautiful woman in the world, her radiance unparalleled. The love Paris felt for her, though ignited by divine intervention, was no less real. With Aphrodite's help, Paris abducted Helen from her home, taking her to Troy. The moment Helen stepped foot in Troy, the war was inevitable. Menelaus, furious at the betrayal, called upon the other Greek kings and heroes, invoking the oath they had sworn to defend Helen's marriage. Led by Menelaus' brother Agamemnon, the Greeks assembled a massive fleet to sail to Troy, and the great Trojan War began. The gods themselves, with their own agendas and desires, watched eagerly from Olympus, each one taking sides in the war that would determine the fates of mortals and immortals alike. Zeus divided will. Zeus, though the king of the gods, found himself in a delicate position. As the father of many of the warriors on both sides of the conflict, heroes such as Achilles, Hector, and Aeneas, he could not remain neutral. He was forced to balance his affection for his children and his duty to the larger cosmic order. Yet his role in the war was marked by a deep sense of tragedy, for he knew that the destruction of Troy, though unavoidable, would shape the world in ways that could not be undone. Despite his efforts to intervene in small ways, Zeus was unable to control the outcome. The war was driven by forces greater than any one god's will. The fates of the combatants were already written, and the gods could only watch as the wheels of destiny turned inexorably toward tragedy. Achilles and Hector. Among the most tragic figures in the Trojan War was Achilles, the son of Zeus and the mortal woman Thetis. Achilles was a man of extraordinary strength and skill, a warrior unlike any other. His fame spread far and wide, and the Greeks placed their hopes in him. But Achilles, too, was bound by pride and honor, traits that, while noble, would ultimately lead to his downfall. In the heat of battle, Achilles faced Hector, the greatest of the Trojan warriors and the son of Priam, the king of Troy. Hector, though a noble and honorable man, stood no chance against Achilles' wrath. In their final confrontation, Achilles killed Hector, dragging his body behind his chariot in a display of vengeful fury. For Zeus, this moment was a bitter reminder of the cost of pride and vengeance. He had fathered both warriors, Achilles and Hector, and he saw in their deaths the tragic outcome of his own desires. Both men had been driven by love for their people, yet it was their pride that had led them to ruin. Achilles, despite his victory, would later die at the hands of Paris, struck in his only vulnerable spot, his heel. The death of Hector and the fall of Troy. Hector's death marked the beginning of the end for Troy. His family, especially his wife Andromache, were consumed by grief, and his passing set off a chain of events that led to the fall of the once great city. The Trojans fought bravely, but without Hector's leadership, their cause seemed doomed. As the war dragged on, the gods themselves became increasingly involved, each choosing sides in the conflict, some aiding the Greeks, others the Trojans, and still others simply reveling in the chaos that had been unleashed. Zeus watched, conflicted, as the flames of war consumed both sides. He had fathered many of the heroes, both Greek and Trojan, and he understood that the war's conclusion would not bring peace. It would only bring the seeds of future conflict, future struggles. Even after the fall of Troy, the influence of the gods, particularly his own, would linger in the lives of the survivors, their fates sealed by the choices they had made under divine influence. The Trojan horse. After 10 long years of siege, the Greeks devised a cunning plan to bring about the fall of Troy. They constructed a massive wooden horse, hollowed out to hold a select group of warriors. The Greeks left the horse at the gates of Troy as a supposed offering to the gods, a token of peace meant to ensure a safe journey home. The Trojans, believing they had won the war, brought the horse into the city as a symbol of their victory. That night, as the Trojans slept, the Greek warriors emerged from the horse and opened the gates of Troy to the Greek army. The city was overrun, and the once proud walls of Troy fell to the flames. The gods watched as their mortal creations were destroyed in a final act of divine retribution. The city of Troy, which had withstood so much, was now reduced to rubble, its people either slaughtered or enslaved. The legacy of Zeus' children. In the aftermath of the war, the consequences of Zeus' involvement were clear. His children, though mighty and legendary, had been caught in the web of fate, their lives marked by both glory and tragedy. The war, and the destruction of Troy, left a deep scar on the world, one that would be felt for generations to come. Zeus, though he had sired heroes, could not save them from the destruction wrought by their own pride and desires. The war had claimed the lives of many of his children, Achilles, Hector, and countless others, each one a reminder of the divine influence that shaped their destinies. But even in the face of this tragedy, Zeus continued to rule, watching as the mortal world moved forward, its people forever changed by the events of the Trojan War. The gods had played their part, but it was the mortals who would bear the consequences. And as the echoes of Troy's fall reverberated through the ages, Zeus knew that the stories of his children, and the war they fought in, would live on as a testament to the power, the tragedy, and the eternal influence of the gods. The vengeance of Hera. Though the Trojan War had ended, the ripples of its chaos were felt far beyond the walls of Troy. The gods had long ago learned that meddling in mortal affairs often led to irreversible consequences, yet they continued their tangled games, their conflicts spilling over into the lives of mortals with tragic certainty. Among the gods, One force had remained constant throughout the war. Hera, the queen of the gods, whose jealousy, anger, and thirst for vengeance had shaped much of the strife in both Olympus and the mortal world. Hera's wrath had never been more evident than in her relentless pursuit of vengeance against Zeus's many lovers. The goddess's pride had been wounded not only by her husband's infidelities, but by the existence of his mortal offspring. Each time Zeus sired a child with another woman, Hera's jealousy flared, and her vengeance became swift and unforgiving. The aftermath of the war. With the fall of Troy, Hera's vengeance did not cease. The war's aftermath was ripe with opportunities for her to exact punishment on the many who had wronged her, or whom she deemed unworthy. Chief among them were the survivors of Troy, including Aeneas, the Trojan prince, whom Hera viewed as a threat to her divine control over the mortal realm. Though Aeneas was destined to found Rome, a city that would rise to dominate the known world, Hera sought to prevent this destiny from unfolding as it was fated. The divine war between gods had spilled into the mortal world, and Hera's wrath now cast a shadow over the survivors of Troy. She turned her fury toward those who had escaped the city's ruin, working through the tides of fate to ensure that their journeys were long, painful, and filled with hardship. Even Aeneas, who had earned the gods' favor for his virtue and courage, could not escape Hera's spiteful reach. The sacrifice of Iphigenia. Hera's vengeance was not confined to the survivors of Troy alone. She took particular pleasure in punishing those who, like Agamemnon, had dared to defy her. Agamemnon, the Greek king who had led the forces to Troy, had incurred Hera's wrath long before the war had ended. His arrogance, and especially his treatment of the gods, was a source of Hera's scorn. Agamemnon's sins would not go unpunished. When he returned to Greece after the fall of Troy, Hera was waiting, watching. In an act of divine retribution, she caused a terrible storm that trapped the Greek fleet at Aulis, delaying their return home. The gods demanded that Agamemnon sacrifice his daughter, Iphigenia, to appease the winds and allow the fleet to return. Hera's will was clear. To punish Agamemnon for his arrogance, she would use his love for his daughter against him. With a broken heart, Agamemnon was forced to offer Iphigenia as a sacrifice. But Hera's vengeance did not stop there. She did not allow Iphigenia's death to be in vain. In a cruel twist, the goddess took Iphigenia's soul and spared it, transforming her into a priestess of Artemis. Iphigenia, once a mortal child, became a divine figure in the afterlife, her death ensuring that the will of the gods was fulfilled. The fates of Heracles and the labors. While Hera's vengeance on mortals and other gods continued, it was in the life of her divine stepson, Heracles, that her fury found its most prolonged expression. Heracles, the son of Zeus and the mortal Alcmene, had been marked for greatness from birth. His strength and courage were unmatched, and his deeds would echo throughout the mortal world. However, to Hera, he was a constant reminder of Zeus's infidelity and an affront to her divine authority. Determined to break Heracles, Hera devised a series of trials that would challenge the hero's will and test his spirit. Heracles, bound by his own sense of duty, would be forced to undertake the 12 labors, 12 impossible tasks that would push him to the very limits of endurance and despair. Each labor was designed to break his will, each task a new form of torment meant to punish him for being born from Zeus's affair. Yet, despite the impossibility of the tasks, Heracles rose to each challenge with strength, cunning, and determination. From slaying the Nemean lion to capturing the Ceryneian hind, from cleansing the Augean stables to capturing the Erymanthian boar, Heracles proved that even Hera's rage could not diminish his greatness. But the final labor, the journey to the underworld to capture Cerberus, the three-headed dog that guarded its gates, was where Heracles' true test lay. Hera's anger, though immense, could not prevent Heracles from succeeding. Heracles' victories in these trials, however, would not be the end of Hera's vengeance. For Heracles, even in his moments of triumph, was not immune to the ever-watchful eyes of the goddess of marriage. The descent into madness. In the final and most tragic act of Hera's vengeance, Heracles, having completed the 12 labors, was cursed by the goddess. In a fit of madness, induced by Hera, Heracles slaughtered his own wife and children, believing them to be his enemies. This horrifying act of violence would haunt Heracles for the rest of his life, as he sought redemption for his sins. The hero who had once been the very symbol of strength and courage was now reduced to a broken man, forced to endure the consequences of Hera's rage. Heracles' journey of suffering and redemption was a direct result of Hera's vengeful pursuit. His eventual ascension to Olympus, where he was granted immortality and joined the gods, could not erase the pain that Hera had caused him. Though he was reunited with his divine father, Zeus, Heracles' life was forever scarred by the goddess's wrath. Hera's eternal vengeance. Hera's vengeance against Zeus's children would continue long after Heracles' death. She was the embodiment of divine retribution, her actions a constant reminder of the consequences of defying her. While Zeus ruled Olympus and the gods paid homage to him, Hera's power lay in her ability to shape the fates of mortals and immortals alike with a single act of jealousy. She did not take pleasure in destruction. Rather, she sought to remind the world of the fragile balance between the gods and mortals. In her eyes, those who betrayed the divine order would suffer, and she would ensure that their fates were sealed through divine justice. The gods, bound by their own desires and destinies, could not escape the long reach of Hera's vengeance. Her anger had shaped the lives of many heroes, kings, and queens, leaving an indelible mark on the fabric of the world. And though she had achieved her vengeance, Hera's legacy was not only one of fury, but also one of unwavering power, an eternal reminder of the depths of divine retribution. The legacy of Zeus and the end of an era. The sun set over Mount Olympus, casting long shadows over the gleaming palaces and celestial halls where the gods resided. It was a place of beauty, power, and divine intrigue, but as time passed, the gods began to feel the weight of their own immortality. They had shaped the world, created heroes, and altered the fates of mortals, yet even the gods were bound by their own destinies. Destinies set into motion by Zeus, the king of the gods. Zeus, once the supreme ruler of the sky, the master of thunder and lightning, had watched over Olympus and the mortal world for eons. His power had been unmatched, and his many affairs with goddesses and mortals alike had resulted in a legacy of heroes, demigods, and kingdoms. But as the years passed, Zeus began to sense that his reign was nearing its end. The balance of the world, shaped by his decisions and desires, was beginning to shift, and the gods who had once followed him unquestioningly were now questioning the very foundation of their divine order. Though the world had been shaped by his rule, it was also marked by the consequences of his actions that had often been driven by love, desire, and the pursuit of power. His children, both mortal and immortal, had left their marks on the world, their lives woven into the fabric of myth and legend. Yet even his most powerful offspring, heroes like Heracles, Perseus, and Helen, were caught in the web of fate, subject to the whims of the gods and the forces of destiny. The passing of heroes. The era of the great heroes was coming to a close. Heracles, the mightiest of all mortals, had ascended to Olympus, his legendary labors behind him. But his peace was hard-won, for the ghosts of his past, Hera's vengeful curse and his own tragic deeds, haunted him. Perseus, too, had completed his fabled quests, slaying the Gorgon Medusa and rescuing Andromeda, but even he could not escape the passage of time. The world that had been shaped by these heroes was changing, and the mortals who once looked to them for guidance were now creating their own destinies. Zeus, aware of the changing tide, pondered the fate of the world he had ruled for so long. His children had all played their parts in the grand narrative, but now it was time for new heroes to rise. And yet, even in the wake of this inevitable change, Zeus could not escape the weight of his own decisions. His love affairs had brought both blessings and curses, and the lives of mortals were forever altered by his divine interventions. His power, though eternal, was now tempered by the knowledge that his reign could not last forever. The reign of Hera and the shifting balance. Hera, who had spent so many eons in opposition to her husband's affairs, was now the one to quietly watch as the divine order began to shift. Her vengeance had shaped the lives of countless heroes and mortals, yet she too was a part of the larger balance of power in the universe. Though she had sought to destroy those who crossed her path, Hera had also protected the sanctity of marriage and the family, ideals that had come to define her in the eyes of mortals. As Zeus's power began to wane, Hera's role on Olympus became more prominent. She had long been the queen of the gods, but now, with Zeus's influence beginning to fade, she found herself standing at the center of divine politics. Her actions, once driven by jealousy and vengeance, were now marked by wisdom and a renewed sense of responsibility. Hera was no longer just the goddess of marriage. She was the protector of stability, the goddess who ensured that the divine order would remain intact as the world of gods and mortals entered a new era. The immortals' reflection. As the gods gathered on Olympus to discuss the future, they reflected on the lives they had shaped. They had made gods of mortals and mortals of gods, altering the course of history with their interventions. They had witnessed the rise and fall of empires, the birth of heroes, and the destruction of entire civilizations. But now the time had come to step back, to allow mortals to shape their own fate. The gods, though eternal, had come to understand that their power could not dictate every moment in the world below. Zeus, having fathered so many legendary figures, understood this better than most. His children, whether divine or mortal, had lived lives full of triumph and tragedy, and now, the time had come for new forces to take hold. He had molded the world with his desires, but he had also witnessed the unintended consequences of his actions. The heroes, the mortals, and the gods who came after him would create their own destinies, for the world was always in motion, always changing. A new era. The world of gods and mortals continued to turn, as it always had, but the reign of Zeus, the mighty ruler of Olympus, was coming to a close. His legacy was not just one of power and desire, but one of creation, destruction, and transformation. The gods who had once revered him now looked toward a new era, where the influence of Zeus would be felt not as a direct force, but as a lingering presence in the stories of his children and the actions of mortals. Zeus knew that his time was finite, even if that time spanned the length of eternity. The great stories of the past, from the fall of Troy to the birth of heroes, were now behind him. It was time for the world to move forward, to evolve, and to create new myths. His legacy, though immortal, would now be carried by those who had come after him, his children, the heroes, the mortals who had shaped the course of history. In the final moments of his reign, Zeus stood alone, looking down at the world he had shaped. The skies, once filled with thunder and lightning, were now calm. The heavens stretched infinitely before him, but the storms of his rule had passed. Zeus had ruled Olympus, had shaped the lives of mortals and immortals alike, and now his story was winding down. The world was ready for new tales, new heroes, and new gods. And so the legacy of Zeus, both the god and the man, remained, etched in the hearts and minds of those who would come after. It was a legacy that would live on in the stories passed down through generations, in the triumphs and failures of mortals, and in the ever-changing world where gods and men were bound together by fate, desire, and the inexorable passage of time.